Good afternoon. My name is Ben, and I will be your conference operator today. At this time, I would like to welcome everyone to the Tips for Attorneys New to Government Work Settings conference call. All lines have been placed on mute to prevent any background noise. After the speaker's remarks, there will be a question-and-answer session. If you would like to ask a question during this time, simply press star, then the number 1 on your telephone keypad. If you would like to withdraw your question, press the pound key. Thank you. I will now turn the call over to Tyler Skandalios, Chair of the ABA-YLD Administrative Law and Regulatory Practice Committee. Sir, you may begin.
Thank you so much, and welcome everyone. Thank you for taking some time out of your lunch to join us today. We hope you'll find the panel discussion helpful. The panel is a presentation or discussion by 5 government attorneys and multi-year veterans of various government attorney positions. And it's about top tips and advice for attorneys who are new to government work setting. Of course, no government work setting is exactly alike, but there are some sort of, recurrent and overarching sort of themes and lessons that apply to any government work setting. And of course, we have our speakers come from a variety of backgrounds as well. So hopefully you'll be able to take specific lessons that may be more specific to their practice setting that also is similar to your practice setting. So my name is Tyler Skandalios. I'm the chair of the ABA-YLD Administrative Law and Regulatory Practice Committee. I'm also a regulatory counsel at the Food and Drug Administration, specifically in the Office of Regulatory Affairs, where I work in a policy office and sort of advise on policy and regulations to policymakers to help draft regulation. Our 5 speakers are Chris Brown, who is the Deputy Law Director for the City of Mansfield, Ohio. Justine Caselli, trial attorney with the U.S. Department of Transportation. Adria Green, attorney advisor of the U.S. Department of Agriculture. Sean Hoover, conference defender for the Cordell Judicial District of Georgia. And Ashley Ludovici Donahue, assistant chief of the career program for the Army. Chris Brown, as the Deputy Law Director for Mansfield, Ohio, has a variety of practice areas, from writing local ordinances to advising city officials on new state laws and making sure everything the city does complies with demands of the U.S. Constitution. He hopes to spend his entire career as government attorney, and he is the former chair of the ABA-YLD Government, Military, and Public Sector Lawyers Committee, and he is currently serving as the YLD Committee's Director. Justine Cassell, trial attorney in the Litigation Enforcement Division of the Office of Chief Counsel, the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, part of the U.S. Department of Transportation. Previously, actually worked for the Ohio Attorney General Office as Assistant Attorney General, where she first worked in the workers' compensation section and then moved to the antitrust litigation section. Adria Green works for the U.S. Department of Agriculture and the Office of General Counsel, and she practiced mainly counseling U.S. Department of Agricultural agencies on a range of litigation and transactional matters. And she is the immediate past chair of the Government Lawyers Division of the National Bar Association. Sean Hoover is a conflict defender for Cordell Judicial District in Georgia, and is also the vice president of the Georgia Association of Criminal Defense Lawyers Board of Directors, presidential appointee to the State Bar of Georgia Indigent Defense Committee, and a YLD scholar for the 2015-2016 bar year, and a co-chair of the YLD ABA Government, Military, and Public Sector Lawyers Committee. Ashley Ludovici Donahue, assistant chief of the career program for the Army, the Pentagon in Washington, D.C., provides advice on professional education, training, development, and assignment to certification through a division for civilians in the Army Legal Services. Last year, she was the vice chair of the ABA-YLD Commission on Women, and is currently serving as co-chair of the ABA-YLD Government, Military, Public Sector, and Lawyers Committee. So first, Ashley's going to talk generally about taking advantage of mentorship and training opportunities, and then Chris will go on to discuss navigating politics of the work environment. Sean will discuss navigating courthouse and courtroom environment. Adria will talk about performance appraisal, and Justine will discuss how to position yourself for new opportunities, whether those opportunities are in your current position or outside of your current position. So I'll start it off with a very sort of quick lesson that I think I wish I knew before I joined the government, and that is, and if you remember this, it may come in handy later, to always assume that in a teleconference, government employees and attorneys, that anyone and everyone could be listening. A little different from private practice, where whoever is listening in the teleconference is fairly trusted because everyone would be billing, and so the client wants to know exactly who is involved in the call. But with the government, there's no billing requirements, so you tend to have a lot more people in on the call. With me, it basically happened where I essentially took the blame for something on a conference call. I thought it was a small group, but it turned out that sort of the head honchos were listening in, and it got a little tricky. So just remember to always assume that anyone and everyone in the office could be listening on talk shops like government attorney. It might serve you well in your career. So anyway, I'm going to turn it over now to Ashley Ludovici Donahue to discuss taking advantage of mentorship and training help.
Thank you, Tyler. So I've been working for the Army since about February of 2011 in different capacities, and some were legal, some were not legal. And as we all know, the federal government is very hard to navigate. And basically, what I would suggest, because this was not told to me when I first started, was that I would find mentors early in your career, as early as the first month that you start working. And when I say mentor, I know people always think of aspirational mentors. I even mean someone who is possibly with you in the same rank as you, in the same class as you, cohort, however you want to call it, so that if you have an idea of what you want to do, you can run it past them. You can ask them how they're doing it, what they want to do, what they're doing to get there, and they may see something in a different perspective than you do. I would also suggest, I know that everybody always says, well, there's supervisors that mentor. Well, I agree with that, but sometimes it's a little bit more difficult to talk to your supervisor about something that may be personal to you, whether it's family or whether it's a goal that doesn't necessarily align with the position that you're in right now. So having someone who is in that supervisor rank but not your actual supervisor, I believe would help as well. And then, of course, the traditional aspirational mentor is always helpful. I think I found in the beginning of my career when I first started, I was almost embarrassed to ask someone, how did you get where you are, and what did you do to get there, and what do I do to get there? But if you say it in a manner of where it's flattering, I found that nobody would ever say, no, I won't talk to you for 15 minutes. So I would always reach back to those people and ask them, this is what I want to do. This is the course that I'm on. How can I change it? And they can help you with what type of jobs would be the best jobs, any broadening jobs, skill jobs, where you should go for, and this is my next point, training, and how you should go about doing it. Because they've clearly navigated the waters, and they know what they're doing, and they've gotten to where you either want to get or similar enough where you want to get. So I feel like mentors are the best people to use and use them to your advantage. Now, leading into training, so I'm one of the training managers for the Army, and I would always suggest people, if there are training opportunities in your agency, to just go for them. Go for them early, go for them frequently. So I know that our agency, we're moving towards competency-based system where we don't necessarily say that someone is a real estate attorney or labor and employment law attorney, but we look towards whether or not someone's qualified for a position based on broader ideas and scopes, such as legal research and writing or oral and written communication. So those competencies, though, are very hard to identify, and they're very hard to define, and they're also hard to train for. So this is also where your mentor comes in. How do I train for this? How do I get the experience necessary to say that I've had supervisory duties or I'm competent in legal research and writing? I mean, I know that we probably all read and do writing every day and we research, but that doesn't necessarily mean we can be considered the most competent or the most qualified of the workforce. So I would always say the more that you get everybody involved in your training and your self-development, the more enthusiastic you are about it, the more interested you are, the more interested everybody else is. And when you get everybody else involved in how you go about your own skill set, I think it definitely helps you. And it helps clearly when you tell your mentors what your plan is. It helps when you put it out loud and you help put it out there, because then they know and they're going to hold you accountable. So Tyler, that's what I have.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. I think that's great things to keep in mind, and mentorship and training opportunities, they're usually there if you just go and find them. And I totally agree that when you first join, it's great to hit the ground running and try and take advantage of as many of those as you can. I think that's a great tip. So now Chris is going to touch on navigating the politics of the work environment, which of course is a pretty intense issue and pretty tricky. But take it away, Chris.
Thanks, Tyler. I am currently a deputy law director for a small to mid-sized city in Ohio, but I've also worked in some federal agencies as well. And so I've tried to kind of gather a couple tips here for navigating politics in the office. Politics is one of those things that I feel like when you're growing up, you're always taught that it's not polite to talk about, perhaps at work or in other public settings where, you're not with close friends. But the interesting thing, or perhaps the unique thing about government jobs, is that there's always going to be that political component somewhere up the food chain, no matter whether you're in federal, state, or local government. Someone above you is going to be an elected official, and it doesn't matter whether it's the president for some of our federal speakers today, or in my case, it's my boss. He's an elected official. So I've kind of, bifurcated this into two types of folks that I see in the government office. And again, as Tyler mentioned at the beginning of the program, every office is different. But typically, I feel your government workers kind of fall into two types of folks. You have folks who want to be long-term government employees and ultimately work their way up and be an elected official, or you have those that don't have that interest. And for those that don't have the interest to ultimately be some type of elected official, they kind of fall into a handful of different kind of subcategories of, your rank and file career government attorney, someone who's looking to transition to private practice, or even those folks who want to become a judge or some other type of legal career besides an attorney. The interesting thing about a judge is that is also political, but we'll kind of get to that in a minute. So, I would say that as far as navigating the politics of the office, it is going to depend heavily on each office. You may have an office where, like in a federal agency, you're more kind of what I would call rank and file employees. You're far away from the kind of appointment position. So if you kind of take your standard U.S. attorney's office, you're going to have the U.S. attorney for your district. That person's going to be a presidential appointee. Everyone down there below that, though, is going to be hired through more or less a version of a classified or civil service program type of hiring program. And so you're going to have all these kind of protections, and typically, as long as you're doing a good job, you're going to be immune from being fired. My friends in the state AG's office always say, as long as I don't take my clothes off at a OSU football game, I'm probably going to keep my job. So the other side of that is the folks then who want to, try to move up and ultimately become the elected official. That to me is the much more tricky aspect of this job, because in those positions, let's say you want to run for one particular party. Say you yourself, you feel like if you ever did run, would probably be a Democrat. Well, what if you get hired in by a Republican and, you've got to kind of work out, how do I be loyal to my boss and keep my job, but at the same time position myself to ultimately run in the future? And by that, I mean making connections with the local party or even the statewide party, depending on what level you want to run at. My advice there would be to say always be respectful. do remember that your politics are protected by the First Amendment. So if your appointer or your boss is running for a position and you don't want to support that person, you are allowed to publicly express your opposition to them from a political standpoint. And of course, you will be protected from being fired under that very limited First Amendment protection. That doesn't mean necessarily, though, that life is going to be really difficult for you on a day-to-day basis in terms of getting bad assignments, being nitpicked every time you make a mistake, every time you're 5 minutes late to the office in the morning, those type of things. So it really does depend on office to office. But I think the kind of key things are in figuring out what you feel like your ultimate career path would be, and then also, how much you want to rock the boat in your particular office. As kind of a closing note on this section, I would say that if anyone is interested in ultimately becoming a judge for U.S. Court of Appeals 9th Circuit, Alex Kaczynski, he's kind of a popular figure. He's got this article called "So You Want to Be a Federal Judge by the Time You're 35," because that's what he did. He was kind of, he's kind of known for being one of the youngest federal judges ever. He's aged at this point, but he was appointed at a very young age. It's kind of his advice that if you get into politics early, if you pick a side, you stay loyal, but, don't alienate the other side, politics are going to take you very far in your career, no matter whether you want to be a judge, you want to be a governor, a legislator, or even if you kind of want to advance in private practice, it's always nice to have political friends. So I feel like as government attorneys, we have the benefit and opportunity of making a lot of political connections very early in our career if we make those choices wisely. And with that, that's all I've got, Tyler. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Chris. That's a lot of great advice. I remember I was actually reading some congressional testimony of some Court of Appeals judge's confirmation, and there was a congressman grilling him. He said, anyone here who's a member of the Federalist Society, raise your hand. and one of the nominees rose their hand, and then he kind of grilled them for a while on what is the Federalist Society, but ultimately the judge was confirmed unanimously, but there was sort of interesting conversation there. So yeah, I mean, if you do, if you're smart about it, I don't think being somewhat political in your career is necessarily cuts off from opportunities. There's always a balance there. Of course, I would also recommend that anyone who's interested in participating in political activity while they're a federal employee should definitely check out the Hatch Act, which governs the federal employees participating in partisan political activity. So you definitely want to talk to your ethics counsel or agency counsel about that. But anyway, thanks a lot, Chris. A lot of great advice there. So, and now I'm going to turn it over to Sean Hoover, who's going to discuss navigating the courthouse and the court environment.
Good morning, everybody. My name's Sean Hoover. I'm a public defender, so that means I spend the majority of my time in different courthouses in Georgia, South Georgia, actually. And basically, I have a couple of tips that I've picked up just over the years of working in different courthouses and listening to other attorneys. Basically, what you need to do, what you need to know to help you just be better in a courthouse. For starters, always find a court clerk. It's usually an older, middle-aged or older woman. She's probably been in that building more than or longer than pretty much anyone else in there. She knows every judge. She knows every secretary. She knows every bailiff. She knows everything about anything you need to know about the courthouse. And more importantly, she's the one that accepts your motions, accepts your briefs. She's the one that you're going to file everything with. That's extremely important because, A, doesn't matter what courthouse you're in, doesn't matter what type of brief or what type of motion it is, if you do it incorrectly, it pretty much doesn't exist. There are some motions and some briefs if the style of your font is wrong, or if the size of your font is wrong, or if it's not filed within a certain amount of time, or if the header is wrong. Your brief or motion technically doesn't exist, and you might hurt your client. You might screw over your client. So you basically get to know the court clerk before anyone else in the building. I work in 4 different courthouses right now in Georgia, in different counties. I couldn't tell you the names of any of my court clerks. But when I walk in there, I know which ones have kids that play football. I know which ones that have kids that play softball. I know which ones that have grandparents. I know all of that because they have pictures on the desk. And that's pretty much how you learn who your clerk is. When you first go in, get to know them as a person before you get to know them as I'm attorney whoever, because they see hundreds of attorneys a day. But if they can get to know you on another basis, they're the ones that will cover your end when you mess something up. Court clerks have covered me, told me about a font that a certain judge likes, or a size because a certain judge can't read or can't see things so well. I mean, court clerks are the greatest thing in the courthouse, and you get to know them. And if you go in there and talk to them about something else other than work first, they will pretty much do everything you need them to do, and they'll make you look like a rock star. Second thing that I've noticed and that I've just experienced is the judge will tell you that they run their calendar. It's not true at all. The judge couldn't tell you most of the time what courtroom they're going to be in on what day in which courthouse. Their secretary pretty much runs everything. And that's the second person you need to know. The secretary has pretty much been as long as the judge has. The secretary runs everything. Out of all of my judges, I have 3 main judges, and I very rarely email them for anything. If I'm going to send an email, I send it to one of their secretaries because they're the ones who tells the judge this is where it's going to go, this is where it's going to be, and the judges pretty much let them have free reign over the calendar. Get to know them. If you know that a certain judge is more likely to rule on your issue or your type of law that you're arguing, you go to their secretary because their secretary can make sure that you're in front of that particular judge. And it's kind of like forum shopping, but it really isn't, because as long as you're around those judges, you get with the secretaries. They run the calendars anyway. And it's usually, again, a middle-aged or an older woman. She's been there forever. She probably knows more about the law than you do, or at least she knows more of how this judge looks at the law than you do. So if you have anything that you need put on a calendar or put on a certain day or put for a certain hearing, and you know this judge is more likely or less likely to rule on it, get with that secretary because they pretty much run everything in that office. The judge may look like he does, he may act like he does, but they don't. The secretaries really do. And I learned that basically my second month as a public defender in the courthouse. You'll figure out who has the real power in that office, and it's usually them. And thirdly, if you're going to be in any courthouse, doesn't matter if it's federal, doesn't matter if it's state, doesn't matter, really doesn't matter at all. You always want to get to know the bailiff. Bailiffs, again, most of them are older. They were on the beat, on the street before, then they got put into the courthouse. They know everything that goes on in that building, from who parks where, outside in the parking lot, to who's making an argument on what day or which judge is in a good mood. You always want to just, when you see a bailiff, shake their hand, get to know them, let them know who you are, let them know where you're from, let them know what you do. And if you get in a good repertoire with them, they'll help you out with anything. In my practice right now, I do a lot of murder cases, a lot of child molestations, a lot of the higher profile cases that get put on the news a lot. And my DA loves to have his face on the news. So he'll run out of the courthouse all the time, go to the jail, go to his office when news cameras are waiting. And I have bailiffs now that call me and tell me that. They'll be like, hey, DA just left to go to the jail. DA just left to go to his office. Channel 11 News is there. Fox News is there. They're about to do this. I have bailiffs that call me and tell me, or they'll text me and tell me that an investigator is about to file more warrants on a client of mine. The bailiffs hear everything. They're everywhere. They all have the little microphones and headsets. And if you get good with them, you pretty much see and hear everything as well. My biggest thing that I would tell a new attorney going into a courthouse, do not go in acting like you're God's gift to the courthouse, because A, you're brand new and you're not. B, all of these people have seen thousands of lawyers before you. They're going to see thousands after you. You want them to know you as a person before they know you as an attorney, because once they can see you as like their nephew or their niece or their next door neighbor or even their kid, then they'll pretty much bend over backwards for you. And that's pretty much all I have. That's the things I really, really picked up on in the last 3 or 4 years that I've been doing this.
Thank you so much, Sean. Yeah, really appreciate your insight. I'm definitely not as familiar with the courthouse and courtroom environment. I spend most of my time doing back offices, so that insight is very much appreciated by myself, and I'm sure others on the line as well. And yeah, I mean, my takeaway, what I try to remember about that is just always be nice to everyone once you're within a block of the courthouse, because you never know, who's who and who does what and who has the power, because a lot of times it's the people that you may not necessarily expect. So now we're going to move on to Adria, and she's going to discuss performance appraisals, which is that aspect of the job that no one really talks about, but that it's in, and that everyone knows is very, very important. So take it away, Adria.
Okay, hello everybody. My name is Adria Green, and I'm an attorney at the U.S. Department of Agriculture, Office of General Counsel in Atlanta. I'm going to tell you a little bit about what I do and the performance management process here in general. I don't know that it would really be applicable to everyone, but I still hope that there's some things you can take away from this that will help you in your own practice. So USDA provides leadership on food, agriculture, natural resources, rural development, nutrition, and related issues. And in particular, it provides economic opportunity throughout rural America. What I particularly do is essentially a commercial type of practice. USDA lends money, and I'm involved with a lot of loans these days, particularly to affordable housing apartment complexes in rural America, and dealing with both closing the loans and then on the backside, unfortunately, when things sometimes go wrong, dealing with litigation involving loans. I also do a little bit of employment litigation as well. So performance management, at least in the federal context and probably everywhere, involves, a lot of different things, and it's a continuous cycle. You want to plan expectations, monitor performance, develop your capacity to perform, periodically undergo performance ratings, and hopefully you will be rewarded for good performance by your superiors. In the federal system, there are at least 4 different components of performance management: the position description, the performance plan, progress review, and performance appraisal. The position description is that long thing you probably saw when you applied for your job, whether it was USA Jobs or outside of the federal system somewhere else. And you should definitely make sure you retain a copy of that. Once you start, your supervisor should give you a performance plan outlining what's expected of you. And if you don't have a copy of that, you should certainly request one right away. You'll have progress reviews throughout the year. At USDA and probably elsewhere, we do it mid-year and annually, and we do it according to the federal fiscal year. So our performance period runs from October 1st to September 30th of every year, and then we have a mid-year review, usually in March, and then an end-of-year review, usually sometime in October. And at the end of that process, you get in a performance appraisal with a specific rating outlining your work. Your performance plan will have different elements that should be linked to the mission of your organization, which is why I kind of started out talking about what your organization does. I think that's always important to keep in mind. What is the actual mission and purpose of your organization, and how does your particular work aid in that mission? In the federal system, we have the Office of Personnel Management that defines critical and non-critical elements. So even though you may have 1 or 2 things on your performance plan that are so-called not critical, I think you should treat everything as critical and try to do your best in all of the categories. There are, I believe, 5 possible outcomes for your overall performance rating. You'll be rated in each element and then an overall rating. The possible outcomes are outstanding, superior, fully successful, marginal, and unacceptable. And, of course, you probably want to shoot for outstanding. And to get there, I would suggest that you start speaking with your managers, of course, immediately. coworkers, as one of my co-presenters said earlier, finding mentors is essential. When I started, someone provided me with a copy of her own performance appraisal, and to this day, I still really rely on the model that she gave me. So I think that developing that relationship is really important. And here at the USDA OGC, we have a union, and so that's another resource. If you have a union representative in your office, they too can provide you probably with some good examples. Here at USDA, again, I don't know if it's the same elsewhere, the employees have to write a memo explaining their work performance throughout the year, and I have a pretty standard outline. We have 4 performance elements. They are legal counseling and case handling, productivity, civil rights, equal opportunity, customer service and communication, and program responsibilities. So I discuss each of those, and I find examples of my work product throughout the year, and I, discuss it kind of in paragraph form, and then I follow up with specific accomplishments in bullet points. So, for example, this past year, under the category of legal counseling and case handling, I talked about some litigation matters I was involved in, a motion for summary judgment I wrote that was granted by a district court, and some various trainings I attended and participated in. And then I followed it up with 4 or 5 bullet points, such as lead counsel in 10, administrative hearings, issued at least 78 formal legal opinions, and so forth and so on. Here we have an electronic case management system where we track our work. So if you have something like that, I would really stay on top of it, because that's really a great way to take a look back at what you did throughout the year. Or if you don't have something like that, you could just simply keep a paper folder, and when you do something that you think is really excellent or unique, just put a copy of your work in that folder and hold on to it. In terms of how I go about writing my performance appraisals, when I first started, I was told about the CCAR approach, and I use it to this day in every paragraph. I try to, at least. And CCAR stands for challenge, context, action, and result. So, a quick example, like I said, we do a lot of loans here at USDA, and the first step in a loan process is determining whether the person applying for the loan is eligible to receive it. So I had a challenge where I had one particular client that would send me a list of every single town in Alabama when they requested, a loan. And so this, of course, was taking up a lot of paper and time. So the action I took was going through the files, and I found an old legal opinion that had already addressed the organizational status of all counties and municipalities in Alabama, and I just updated it to the present. And so the result is that process has been eliminated, and hopefully we've all saved ourselves some time and paper. Like I said, again, collect product throughout the year. I think that's really the best way to do this, is an ongoing process, not just waiting until the end. And when you do have your meeting with your supervisor, you definitely want to ask about areas where you can improve. Ask about training opportunities. I've often heard about some different things locally and nationally that I never would have considered if I hadn't asked my supervisor about it. Certainly ask about advancement opportunities, like one of my co-presenters said. That can be somewhat uncomfortable, but you definitely need to advocate for yourself. And work assignments. If you're trying to get experience in a different area, it would be helpful to be able to say, look, I've done this sort of work this year and I enjoyed it, but I'd like to do more of a different type of work in the future. So that is all I have. I'm not sure if you have my contact information, but I'm happy to share it afterwards, and feel free to reach out to me. Thank you.
Okay, thanks so much, Adria. Yeah, afterwards I'll talk to you all, and we can perhaps send out a follow-up email to people with contact information for those who want to share it. Yeah, thank you very much for that insight. Performance appraisals are actually something
that I don't think I give enough attention. I think sometimes I get so into the work I'm doing that I don't think about how does that relate to the discussion I had at the beginning of the year about what my supervisor wants from me. So I think it's really important to treat that seriously. And also, an additional tip that I would offer from my experience is that sometimes the performance, assessment that you go over in the beginning of the year, sometimes it can be a bit formulaic and may not cover actually everything that your supervisors expect from you. So it's good to, instead of sort of treating the initial meeting as a sort of a quick affair, do talk about your supervisor, go into the details and say like, hey, have that discussion and make sure that everyone, that you understand, what your supervisor is looking for. So yeah, that's a very important topic. And Adrian, you have a lot of great points, and it's important to treat those seriously and periodically tie your work back to that performance appraisal plan. So now Justine is going to discuss how to position yourself for new opportunities, and those are opportunities both inside your current position and outside of it. But a similar rule will apply to discovering those opportunities to take advantage of. Justine?
Thanks, Tyler. Hi, everyone. As Tyler mentioned earlier, I'll give you a little refresher. My name is Justine Caselli. I'm currently a trial attorney at the Department of Transportation. More specifically, I am in the Litigation and Enforcement Division of the Office of Chief Counsel at the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, NHTSA. Before I came here to NHTSA, I was an Assistant Attorney General at the Ohio Attorney General's Office, where I did antitrust litigation and workers' comp litigation. And before that, during law school, I interned at the Ohio Attorney General's Office doing health and human services work, but I also interned at the Federal Trade Commission doing financial practices issues in their Bureau of Consumer Protection. So I give you my background a little bit just to breach the subject of how important it is to position yourself for new opportunities. I came out of law school knowing that I wanted to get initial experience in the courtroom, and I was able to do that at the Attorney General's Office in the workers' compensation section. However, given my internship with the FTC and just some of my law school classes, product liability, torts, I knew that workers' compensation specifically wasn't my final stop. So I was able to get some fantastic experience there, but I really wanted to explore some new opportunities to see where it is I wanted my career to go. So one of the key things I can give you about how to move on to something different or how to even breach that subject with your supervisors, the most important piece of advice I can give you is to do good work. Your performance is key. Over time, various mentors of mine have stressed that the best thing that you really can do if you're looking to advance either in your current position or move on to a different position is to show your supervisors that you're ready to take on additional or different tasks, and to just prove to them that you can do good work for them, that they can trust you with added responsibilities. Show them that you can get your assignments done on time. Volunteer to help other attorneys in your office if you have the time and the flexibility in your schedule to do so. I think it's really important to demonstrate that you can handle your current position and any of the volunteer opportunities that you decide to take on. That really goes a long way. I know it has in my personal experience. And it reassures your supervisor that if they do choose to take you up on your offer and give you new or different assignments in your current position, that they can trust you to handle it and to continue to represent your office well. So that's the first point that I wanted to note. The second piece I wanted to point out was make sure that you speak up about what your interests are. As Adrian mentioned while she was talking about performance appraisals, and as Ashley mentioned when she discussed mentoring and training, people aren't going to share opportunities with you if they don't know that you're interested. So it's really important that you continue to connect with your colleagues that are at that are your peers, that are at your level, as well as your supervisors, and colleagues that may be a level above you or a level below you. Build that sense of unity in the office. Go to the happy hours, have lunch with people, go on coffee runs. It's important to make those connections, because through those conversations, a lot of times you get to know each other personally, and you can have a more deep discussion about what's interesting to you. You can dig in with those colleagues about what they're working on, and if some matter that they're working on is of interest to you and they know that, in the future they may invite you to tag along to a meeting or a hearing, or they may even speak to the supervisor without you knowing to get permission to ask you to lend a hand and assist in that matter more formally. So those are really important pieces to keep in mind, that those personal connections within your office do lead to other opportunities. I know, just another personal note, there were a few times in my old positions where attorneys that I had gotten close to personally through whatever means, whether we were on a kickball team or whether we all went to lunch together or we went on a coffee run, a lot of times they'd pull me aside personally and say, hey, a friend of mine at this other agency or at this law firm is looking for somebody. I don't know if you're even looking to move. I don't know if you're looking for a new job, but you seem like you'd be a good fit. Do you want me to pass along the information? So those personal connections, those genuine connections, can really be invaluable. And just as Adria mentioned about performance appraisal specifically, that is the great time to speak with your current supervisor about training opportunities. If there is a particular area that you want to become more developed in, that's a good opportunity to talk to your supervisor about those options. It's a good time to talk to your supervisor about what does the path to advancement look like if you want to move up in your current office. It's also a good time to find out whether or not there is a path to advancement. Oftentimes there's so many attorneys stacked above you and so many different layers and levels, it may be difficult for you to advance in that current position. So it's good to hear that firsthand, whether or not, it's going to take you 10 years to get to the chief position or the director position. And if that's the case, you have that knowledge to be able to make a personal decision about whether or not you need to move on to some other job. And also that's an opportunity in the performance appraisals meetings to speak with your supervisor about your current work assignments and to express your interest in other work assignments. Ideally you're going into that meeting and you already have enough good performance behind you to where the conversation is comfortable, and you can say, I'm doing really good work on X matters. I heard such and such is doing these types of cases. I'm really interested in that. Is there any opportunity for me to get involved? Just having those candid conversations, they may be difficult, but they're very important because, as I mentioned, if people don't know you're interested, they may not extend the offer. A third point I'll make is to be available. It's one thing to express your interest, but it's another thing to not be available when someone provides you an opportunity. So keep in mind that as you're expressing your interest, you make the personal assessment on whether you have the bandwidth professionally and personally to take on more work. It may be a wonderful opportunity, and you may decide that you can sacrifice going home a little bit earlier. You can sacrifice some extracurricular activities to take on these new work tasks to broaden your career opportunities or your career prospects. But that's definitely something I wanted to point out to keep in mind, because we all are attorneys. Most of us are pretty type A, so we just have to make sure that we keep a note of exactly where our time is going, especially if it's something that may be important to us. And the last thing before I turn this back over to Tyler, and I know it's cliche, but I can't not mention it on a call about good tips, is networking. It is very necessary. It has helped me tremendously. Being lawyers, a lot of us tend to run into the credentials issues, right? All of us may not have been on law review. All of us may not have been at the law firm. All of us may not have those connections to boost our career. So it's important that you get to know people outside of what's on your resume. Go to the networking events. As I mentioned earlier, network informally with your colleagues and your superiors. Stay in contact with your law school classmates, your former supervisors, the people that you've done internships with, even attorneys that are at the law school and you've left 2 years ago. Go back to the school, and if you have an opportunity to speak there or connect with those younger attorneys, do that. Those are great ways to get your name out there and give people the opportunity to get to know you personally, because they may present opportunities that you don't even know are possible. One of the best things that I've found out about networking, at least from my perspective, is you really want to try to make genuine connections with people. It's easy to go and meet someone and have a surface-level conversation and exchange business cards, but you really want to make sure that if there is a genuine connection with someone, if you can chit-chat, if you can laugh with them, if you have personal things in common, stay in touch with them. Definitely, try to send an update about how your life is going, once a quarter or maybe twice a year. Do that with your former supervisors if the good relationship is there, because I think that's really important for them to, I really remember working with Tyler, or I really remember working with Justine. I had a good experience with them. You have an opportunity, let me pass that along. So you never know where these opportunities can come from. So just keep that in mind, continue to network, make genuine connections, be available, and speak up. I think those are the key takeaways. So I'm happy to answer any questions, but at this time I'll turn it back to Tyler.
Thank you so much, Justine. And I think that's how to position yourself for new opportunities. That's such an important area, and I think that's one of the biggest sort of topics that sort of concern young lawyers. Because sometimes where we're just starting out in a law career and maybe we don't know exactly what we want to do, but we're thrown into a practice area, and you sort of have to look into yourself and be like, well, what do I think of this practice area? Is this what I want to do? Is this helping me go where I want to go? And it almost goes without saying, I doubt this will be new information for anyone, but it is important to sort of have that sort of long-range plan. Like, where do I want to be in 10 years? Where am I now, and how do I get there? And that plan can be flexible. You should reevaluate every so often. Be like, well, I used to think that in 10 years I want to be here, but now maybe I'm actually really liking this. I've learned a new practice area, or I've heard of this and I want to explore that, or I really like what I'm doing now, but I didn't think I would, but now I do. It is possible to so to speak, Forrest Gump your way somewhere, and sometimes that works out. But it's also
Operator, I believe we may have lost Tyler.
No, Tyler's still connected, sir.
Yeah, can you all hear me? Sorry about that. I think I'm still connected.
Yes, sir.
Well, anyway,
your line is still connected. I can hear you.
Okay. All right. Well, anyway, at this point, I think I'm going to open up to questions if anyone in the audience has any.
And if you'd like to ask a question, please press star 1 on your telephone keypad. We'll pause for just a moment and compile a Q&A roster. Sir, I'm not showing any questions online.
Okay.
Change that. Well, Adam Rubin has a question.
Okay, great.
Does anyone have experience, or do you have experience or understanding of if somebody's in a federal or state position that has legal responsibilities but is not specifically an attorney position, what are some tips for navigating the workplace and ultimately moving to an attorney position, without people thinking, oh, well, it was more of an admin position, we're looking for somebody who came directly from private practice with actually in the courtroom experience, et cetera?
All right. I can actually take a first crack at that. So my first job out of law school was as an attorney advisor in the Social Security Administration, helping adjudicate disability opinions. And so, it was an attorney position, but it was fairly narrow in scope, and I sort of wanted to explore other areas as well. The one thing you can do is try and take advantage of pro bono opportunities. I looked at pro bono opportunities. There's a program in D.C. that allows government people with law degrees and bar memberships to take on pro bono cases under the supervision of. So I litigated 2 landlord tenant cases and enjoyed those experiences. And I think they helped me later on sort of learn my strengths and talk about those experiences. And currently, I'm a regulatory counsel at the U.S. Food and Drug Administration, and so that's, but which isn't necessarily being in a courtroom, but I think taking advantage of pro bono opportunities and exploring different opportunities sort of helps you expand your abilities and also sort of learn what your interests are. I'll turn it over to anyone else on the panel who wants to take a stab at that.
I could take a stab at it. Before I graduated, I was just an intern and an extern at different public defender offices in Missouri and Georgia. And it's basically like one of the panelists already said, do good work. That's the way your name gets out there. My second year of law school, I was in a trial division in Missouri Public Defender Office, and every time one of the attorneys had a task, I was the first one to jump up and say, yes, I'll do it. It didn't matter if I didn't even know what it was. I would tell them, yep, I know how to do that. Then I'd go to another attorney, figure out how to do it, and then I'd do it. I was always the first one to say yes. I was always the first one to say I'll do it, and my name was put on a lot. But I mean, you have to back it up. You have to do good work. Once I got out of law school and finally graduated, my first trial was a capital murder trial in Georgia in the federal defender system, and it's only because they saw everything else I had done before. Because when you go in there, you have to give them something. You have to give a writing sample. You have to give them these are the topics I've done. These are the issues I've done. I think for the federal defenders, I had to give them like 5 different writing samples. Some were memos, some were briefs, some were motions. And you have to have the people to back you up and say, when they get that call, say, yes, this is what he's done. He's never said no. He's always done this. He's always gone above and beyond. He always turned it in early. He was never late. I mean, it's all about the work that you do, regardless of the fact that you're a lawyer right now. It follows you. And if you do poor work and the person gets that call, they're going to know about it. So it's all on you. You get the work, you put the work in, you put the time in. Don't ever say no. Don't ever say give it to somebody else. Don't ever say I can't do that. I mean, just do the work and do it well, and you'll be fine.
Yeah, I think that's great advice. I think it does go to identify opportunities that are going to take you towards where you want to go and pursue those opportunities, as much as you can. Anyone else on the panel want to add anything to that? All right. Do we have any other questions on the line?
And as a reminder, if you would like to ask a question, press star 1 on your telephone keypad. No more questions, sir.
Okay. All right. So I was thinking, I guess while we wait for maybe one last question, and perhaps to close if there are no other questions, just go around the panel and ask everyone to state sort of in a few words what they believe the most, from their experience, and maybe your belief now may be different from what it started at.
What do you think is the most important characteristic of a young attorney that's important for them to cultivate? If it's all right with you all, we'll just go down the order of presentation, unless anyone wants to jump in.
Sure. You said what was the most important characteristic?
Yeah, for a young attorney to cultivate within themselves.
I think a lot of the panel members said this, but just being the first person. So if there's ever anything that needs to be done, if there's anything that you want to do yourself, it's always being the first person. So that means the first person yourself, like being the first person on the scene to say, hey, I'm going to do it, but also the first person that everybody thinks of. When they say that we have this extra task to be done or this extra project, they'll think, wait, hold on, Ashley is always there, so let's give it to Ashley. It's just, and I don't know if that's motivation, I don't know if that's just being competent. It's like a whole bunch of different factors together to make yourself that person that everybody thinks of.
Absolutely.
Great. Chris here. I would say it's a really good idea to cultivate respectfulness of others. Kind of like Sean said, it doesn't matter whether it's a judge or if it's a deputy clerk or a fellow attorney. You should always treat people with respect because, you might be the smartest, best writing, most prepared attorney in the courtroom, but if you're not respectful of other people, your colleagues and everyone else in the courtroom is going to try to find every possible opportunity to undercut what you do or to make your life miserable. So I think when you kind of bring competency with respectfulness, it really makes for a great young attorney.
Yeah, absolutely.
Was I third? This is Sean. Was I third?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, go ahead, Sean.
Oh, okay. Branching off of what Ashley said, more of being the first person, also, I guess along those lines, you basically have to fight for yourself. If you're not going to fight for yourself, no partner is going to think you're going to fight for his firm. No client is going to think you're going to fight for them. I mean, if you're not the first one to step up and say, I got this, they're not going to have confidence in you. So the first thing is, yes, be the first one. Be the one that everyone thinks, hey, I have a question, or hey, I have an issue, or hey, I have a project. This person is perfect for it, and I know this person will fight for it because they have that confidence. Always go in there with that confidence. Be the first person and always have that confidence, and then other people will have confidence in you as well.
Okay. So Adrian and Justine, any other quick tips to close it off?
This is Adria. I agree with all that was said, and I'll just say I think the best way to stand out especially when you're starting out, is to be an excellent writer. I started out at a law firm where I had a partner who was very particular about writing style and everything from fonts on upwards. So to the extent you are not totally confident in your writing, I would say that taking that type of training, CLE, stuff like that, that should be probably mission one as a young lawyer.
Yeah, absolutely. And going back to the question I was asked earlier, take advantage. If writing is a very important part of being a lawyer, especially litigation positions and really just most lawyers in general. So, branch out. ABA YLD is a great resource.